Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to look into a topic that's actually a Patreon request. There was a post on the Age of Empires 2 Reddit questioning the obscure +1 attack bonus that elite Mamelukes have against themselves. So I thought we'd talk briefly about that, as well as take the opportunity to look at other examples of odd bonus damage in the game. That could mean either things that are similar in being quite niche, or in other cases ones that are actually quite large, but just unexpected bonuses. The classic example of weird bonus damage, of course, is the Chukunu's extra arrows dealing 0 melee damage in addition to their usual pierce attack, which sounds like it should have no effect on anything. As it turns out though, it interacts with the ram's negative melee armor, indirectly giving Chukunu a bit of surprise bonus damage against rams. I'll be trying to step away from some of the better known examples like that one though, and include a few that even if you know the game's bonus damage values pretty well, I think it's unlikely you'll know all of these. With that though, let's jump back to the elite Mameluke. Now, elite Mamelukes are by no means unique for having bonus damage against themselves, and in fact the list of units for which that's true is very long. It's easy to come up with 10 examples in fact on the spot, but what's so unusual is that it's just +1, which hardly seems worth the effort, especially when you consider how often Mamelukes are even fighting each other. It would either require conversions or 2 Saracen players both making their unique unit against each other for that situation to even come up. My guess though is that it's just a sneaky way to encourage the elite upgrade in mirror games, as now if you're in a Saracen mirror matchup and making Mamelukes head to head, getting the elite upgrade not only gives you the regular benefits, but also the secret +1 damage. Now, why Mamelukes even have a special type instead of just being camels is an interesting question. Originally in Age of Kings, they were a cavalry/infantry unit, taking bonus damage from hand cannoneers and anti-cavalry units alike. Later in the Conqueror's expansion, a lot of things happened at once. First, Mamelukes lost their infantry armor, instead gaining archer armor, making them weaker to skirmishers. They then received a brand new camel and ship armor class that was given to all camel units, though at the same time they didn't lose cavalry armor, instead gaining a bit of resistance against it. While having lots of different armors might sound like a good thing, in this case that just means they take a lot of bonus damage. Finally, on top of all that, they received a special Mameluke armor, which is actually pretty unusual for a unique unit, and most don't get a unique armor type. So why go to the trouble for this one specifically? The answer is because the devs thought they were too good against their counters. To give an example, the Spearline units do +15, 22, and 32 to cavalry as you go through their upgrades. Now, camels are quite a bit weaker than heavy cavalry when it comes to their baseline stats, so to help them out, the Spearline actually do reduced damage to camels, though obviously it's still quite a bit. Against Mameluke specifically though, they didn't seem to think that that was quite enough. So the Spearline has a bit of extra bonus damage against that specific unit, which together means they do even more bonus damage against Mamelukes than against regular cavalry, and obviously much more than against camels. In fact, the full list of units with bonus damage against Mamelukes is pretty short, and is just the Spearline, Camel Riders after their heavy upgrade, Cannon Galleons for some reason, Elite Kamyuks, and of course Elite Mamelukes themselves. As we'll see, this is far from the strangest of the hidden attack bonuses though, and that's actually the main direction I wanted to go here. So now let's move on to other units, making our first stop at sheep. We'll start off here with the observation that villagers have 3 attack, sheep have 7 HP, and yet a villager kills them in 1 hit. So obviously something strange is going on. It turns out sheep and related herdables, along with a couple of other animals, are sort of unusual for taking incredible amounts of bonus damage. The way things work, every attack from a unit carries information about what different types of attack they're doing and a corresponding value for each. The elite skirmisher here, for example, has 7 pierce attack, but another 4 archer attack, 3 spearman attack, and 2 cavalry archer attack. By default, units have 1,000 armor against everything except melee and pierce damage, so most incoming types of bonus damage is negated. The skirmisher is still technically sending its anti-archer bonus damage at a champion, it's just running into 1,000 armor against it. If instead the unit is meant to take a certain type of bonus damage though, like an archer in this case, then its archer armor is set from the default of 1,000 down to 0, so it's not able to resist the incoming anti-archer damage. Sometimes it's a negative number, or sometimes slightly positive to give some resistance, like cataphracts who have cavalry armor set to 12 instead of 1,000, but in the vast majority of cases for hidden armor, it's either 1,000 or it's 0. Sheep and a few other animals though are unusual for having their base armor set to 0 by default to everything. Effectively, that means they take every bonus damage in the game. When scouts hit them with seemingly 3 attack, notice a sheep with 7 HP still dies. If we give it more HP so it'll actually survive, we can see the scout is doing 9 damage. So where does that number come from? It's actually because they're not just taking the melee damage of the scout, but also the scout's +6 against monks. That's also why shepherds are able to kill sheep in one hit despite seemingly not having enough attack to do that. You may have assumed that's because they have anti-sheep bonus damage, but there's no such thing. Instead, it's thanks to their +3 against buildings and +6 against stone defenses. A sheep working in a monastery I can definitely understand, but at this point it's getting a little weird. For an even more extreme case, petards have a wide variety of anti-building bonuses, and using this roided out sheep with 2000 HP, you can see it's taking all of it. Basically, sheep are wrecked by everything, except, funny enough, camel scouts. Until Feudal Age, they don't have any bonus damage, since that would mean that they're able to dominate early scout battles. And a side effect of that is it means they need 4 hits in order to lame a sheep. Next though, let's move on to another strange but sort of related example with organ guns and Hussite wagons. Their extra projectiles use attack type 33, which is an armor type that nothing in the game has. Remember, to take anti-archer damage, for example, you need archer armor, and making the projectiles use type 33 is then a bit mysterious. Theoretically, everything should just block that damage, and that's actually what the devs were counting on, with organ guns and Hussite wagons having 1002 attack of type 33. Keep in mind, the default against something that isn't one of your unit's types is 1000. So it's an easy way to make sure everything takes 2 damage from their secondary projectiles, regardless of any armor. Well, not everything, I suppose, as sheep are still going to take all 1002. The next one you may already know if you've watched my previous videos, and it's the unusual bonus damage that towers take from extra arrows. What's strange is the main arrow just does regular pierce damage to other defensive buildings, while any extra arrows carry 5 bonus damage. That means garrisoning a villager to make a tower shoot 2 arrows doesn't double their attack against another tower, it does 6 times the damage. Admittedly, this one isn't all that obscure, but it is a very good example to know if you're ever in a tower war. Keeping with defensive buildings, let's circle back to the topic of camels, where they have their own unexpected interaction. We already saw how camels were given their own class and take less bonus damage from spears, etc. Slightly less well known is they also take a bit of bonus damage from towers, castles, and even town centers. This is a holdover from way back when ships and camels shared the same armor class. And part of making defenses stronger against ships meant camels unfortunately suffered as well, even taking extra damage from heated shot. In the African Kingdom's expansion, camels and ship armor went their separate ways, but presumably everyone was so used to camels taking bonus damage from defenses that a bit of that stayed in the game, though not to the same degree. It's among the reasons that camels aren't a very good raiding unit compared to knights. Not only do they have 2 less pierce armor, but there's a bunch of defensive buildings doing a bit of secret bonus damage against them as well. Now that said, it wasn't just camels that got hurt by the shared unit type with ships though. Ships have also picked up a few extra counters in that arrangement. Namely, spear units, camels, but even eagle warriors and Genoese crossbows have some bonuses passed over to ships as well. They tend to be less than their anti-cavalry bonuses and in the same ballpark as their bonuses against camels. It seems unlikely to me that these would have been included in the game if not for camels and ships sharing an armor class for so long, and at this point it's just a feature of the game. Unexpected interactions between land and sea units don't stop there though. With cannon galleons, in addition to massive bonus damage against buildings and high base attack, they have an extra +15 against infantry, cavalry, and archers, as well as an extra +4 against Mamelukes that I mentioned earlier, for who knows what reason. Now this seems pretty odd on the face of it, and I assume they wanted to just give them 50 melee attack instead of 35, but that made them too good against other ships. The compromise seems to have been that they gave them lower base attack, but then just brought them up against basically everything on land. Jumping back to land, one that's easy to overlook is that gunpowders have an obscure +4 extra damage taken from the winged hussar, whereas the regular hussar has no bonus damage against them. This is just a little extra thing for Lithuanians and Poles that can catch an opponent off guard, and in fact bonuses against gunpowder units are incredibly rare, with the condottiero being the only other example in the game. In the reverse, hand cannoneers and slingers have a strange bonus of their own, where they do +10 against infantry, but an extra +1 against the spear line in particular, just for good measure. In fact, spear units take extra damage from just about every type of archer, as well as skirmishers, genitour, cavalry archers, with even more after Parthian tactics, as well as stone defenses. It's actually kind of rough out there being a spear unit, and they have to feel at times like the whole world's out to get them. In a similar vein, Eagle Warriors also have a pretty rough go of things, taking +1 from pretty much every infantry unit, including spearmen. As good as the Eagle's stats may look side by side with another infantry, often the deck is subtly stacked against them. But now let's look at a couple of examples for Siege, which we haven't really talked about too much yet. The first one we'll look at is Rams, who take a very unexpected bonus from Conquistadors of all things. Remember, bonus damage is independent of Pierce Armor, so you're getting decent guaranteed damage with every shot. Presumably, this is to make up for their slow reload time, as they would otherwise take a long time to bring down Rams, which would also explain why Hand Cannoneers have their own secret +2 bonus damage against them as well. Scorpions also have slight bonus damage against Rams on top of doing 0 melee damage, meaning they get the same benefit of the Ram's negative melee armor similar to the Chuko Nu. Another similar situation where 0 bonus damage ends up being very helpful is the Step Lancer, which has a secret +0 against Siege. That doesn't help against Rams, but Ballista Elephants have -2 Siege armor, so it's just an unexpected extra 2 damage that Step Lancers do to Ballista Elephants in particular. Your guess is as good as mine why they would add this bonus to Step Lancers solely to help in that one matchup. Another interesting Siege unit is the Petard. We already saw all the bonus damage they do to sheep thanks to several different bonuses stacking, but that also leads to some implications about what they should target. They start with +500 against buildings, add another 100 against castles, and another 900 against walls and gates. That's why despite having triple the HP, Petards are about as good at breaking through stone walls as they are house walls. In contrast, the heavy demolition ship only has +280 against buildings. So even with an entire boatload of explosives, they do about half as much damage to docks as Petards. But now we'll end on my personal favorite obscure bonus damage, which is for a unit you may not even know is in the game called the Ninja. Now this is just a scenario editor unit, so you won't run into it very often, but it has a very specific bonus. There's actually a special armor type called Class 36 that is only used on kings, queens, and heroes. The Ninja is completely unique for having a +9 bonus against that class. Personally, I think it should have been +2000 for a guaranteed insta-kill, but I still think it's a cool Easter egg. So that's been a list of some of my favorite obscure bonuses, with a few more practical ones sprinkled in as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.